Welcome to the study. This is Professor Hemlock here. Today, I am giving my personal review of the Venthyr Covenant. Now, there's really multiple aspects to every covenant and what makes them different, unique, and what kind of creates a good experience to me. So I kind of want to break this down into three sections. We'll talk about raid gameplay first, Mythic Plus gameplay, and then overall the feel and playstyle of the Covenant. So starting off with raid gameplay, Venthyr kind of, golly, this is hard to say. I don't want to be too negative here. But Venthyr definitely feels like an RNG fiesta. It feels like a lot of randomness. Now that randomness comes from Theotar the Mad Duke's Soothing Shade. This is an extremely insane proc. You get 525 mastery for 12 seconds while you're standing under this little umbrella that pops out. It looks really nifty. It feels really cool. You get a little satisfying sound whenever it pops up. And it will make you do a ton of damage. In raid situations, I've seen my Touch of the Magi's go from, 40 to 50,000 without the shade, up to 70,000 with the shade proccing on my DPS goes. And that randomness does not feel good. And then you combo that randomness with the normal state of randomness that is clearcast proc farming. So you're having to farm clearcast procs a lot with Venthyr and really any other covenant besides Curian. So there's like an RNG aspect on an RNG aspect. Now, one of the things that is really nice is being able to run Imperial Ordnance. This is the traditional setup I use for raid here. Essentially a very high mastery build. I do run a Changeling with mastery as well. And then a minimal amount of haste, as minimal as I could get personally. I do have quite a bit of haste gear, and I don't have a lot of extra gear for non-haste slots, so I would lower the haste a little bit. But I run a high mastery build for it, and it kind of plays out really nicely because you don't have to worry too much about evocating. When you're spamming your blasts, you typically are going to get 3 clear cast charges during your window. And you're going to perform very consistently on getting those 3 clear cast procs during the setup phase. But there is a longer setup phase. When you compare this to, a Curian, for example, when the setup phase is essentially non-existent. There's a very minimal setup phase. You're essentially just getting your Harmony stacks to 18. You don't have to do any clear cast proc farming. It's consistent. It feels good. Venthyr feels a little bit more inconsistent in the clearcast farming way, and then you add in this Soothing Shade proc for raid, and that it just feels bad. It feels bad. I don't like it. It's just a personal thing that I don't like about that kind of setup and playstyle that I don't feel like is efficient. Now, on top of that, looking at the logs for raiding, we're starting to see Venthyr drop off. Okay? Where Venthyr excels is those first 4 mythic bosses, because you're able to use the Time Warp legendary, and Time Warp plays a little bit better for Venthyr than any of the other legendary effects that are commonly used, such as Harmony. So Venthyr is still doing really good on those first 4 bosses, but when you look at pretty much every boss after that, Venthyr is just a steep plummet off, where it goes from having multiple parses in the top 50 to essentially not having really any, or a one-off here and there. So in raid content, I think Venthyr is just not optimal. It doesn't have any of the benefits that Deathborn has right now, where you have this massive, off-the-charts, insane burst damage on that 3-minute cooldown. It doesn't have the benefit of Curian, where it's got a short setup window and it's got a really strong funnel damage aspect that pairs well with one specific legendary. Venthyr kind of has this in the middle ground feeling, where you're getting some cooldown reduction from running Prodigy, but you're not getting enough cooldown reduction to the point where it's making a massive difference in everything like you would with Shifting Power as Night Fae. So it's definitely the bottom performing covenant in my eyes for raid content. Now, there is hope on the future here. In the video yesterday, I talked about the legendary for Venthyr. That legendary for Venthyr has a lot of potential. This is potentially going to be the first 1 minute AP you can start seeing, and it matters because you'll start seeing Mirrors of Torment get a 1 minute cooldown as well. So if you get AP and Mirrors to both be a 1 minute cooldown, Venthyr is going to see a lot of potential down the road. Right now, I don't feel like that potential's there. I don't like the playstyle, and overall, I just don't think it performs as well as any of the other Covenants and raid content. With that, we'll move on to Mythic Plus content, and this is where I feel bad, but I do want to be brutally honest here. Venthyr sucks. It's so bad in Mythic Plus content. It feels bad. It's just not good feeling in Mythic Plus content. And I think that's really one of the big dissuasions of Venthyr as a Covenant overall. So where every other Covenant feels a little bit more consistent in the burst windows, and in Mythic Plus, they allow you to run the Bombardment Legendary and things like that. With how Mirrors of Torment focuses on its gameplay around the Clearcast procs, I did find that Echo actually did the most DPS. Instead of running the Bombardment Legendary, I was using the Harmony Legendary and Echo, and I got better performances out of that combo instead of running Bombardment plus Resonance talent for those Clearcast procs. I think really that's kind of just where Venthyr needs to perform. So I was running the same raid build as I was in Mythic Plus. I did swap out some things for Mythic Plus. I found that Imperial Ordnance was inconsistent in Mythic Plus, inconsistent at best, where it just wasn't performing exactly the way I wanted it to, so I did switch out for Soul-Letting Ruby and Crit on my Changeling, and I did perform better running a heavier Crit setup and a less Mastery-based setup for Mythic Plus. So that was a little bit of a change I made, and near the end I was getting better figures. But in reality, the playstyle itself is just not suited for Mythic Plus, and it does not feel good. That being said, you still do insane DPS numbers, right? When I'm setting up my burst properly and I get everything to function how it should, I'm still pulling on Fortified Weeks. I'd still see AoE burst of, 25 to 35,000, right? That's still really, really strong. It's still great. It's a lot of damage. It's definitely not Curian levels of burst. It's definitely not Necrolord levels of burst, and it's definitely not consistent burst like Night Fae offers. It performs the worst out of those Covenants in that aspect, but it's still good burst. So if you're someone that likes to off-spec Frost, Venthyr's going to be an okay option because you can at least play your off-spec Frost really well, and Arcane's still going to be tolerable. Tolerable. It is not good. It is not good compared to any of the other Covenants in Mythic Plus. It's terrible compared to the other Covenants, in fact. I could not get even to push what I would consider to be very reasonable DPS figures. Where every other Covenant pushing 7k to 8k DPS is relatively easy at my eye level. I don't have to struggle too much. It just kind of falls into place and happens. With Venthyr, you are hoping and praying to get that Theotar Soothing Shade proc on your DPS goes. You're having to line things up. You still need to fish for clear casts. And you're just, in reality, it's so inconsistent and it just doesn't play that well to the point where you are not getting a lot of really good DPS figures. I was able to pull 7k DPS on a couple keys, but I would say it was pure luck that got me there in the first place, rather than actually having consistent damage. On average, I was pulling between 6 and 6.5k DPS in Mythic keys, and that's just too low. It's too low for my eye level and my skill of where I'm playing at. It just doesn't offer a good enough consistent damage profile for that. So moving on from Mythic Plus, talking just about my general feelings about the playstyle of Venthyr and kind of a full wrapping up of my thoughts here. So where Venthyr does kind of feel nice is the interaction between Arcane Power, Mirrors of Torment, and Prodigy. So this interaction is a really good feeling. You feel very, very consistent, where with other covenants, lining up your CDs is a little bit more difficult, and sometimes it can kind of feel clunky with other covenants. Like Night Fae, you have too much CDR, and the CDR ends up having like weird gaps between where you have extra cooldowns, and you don't know whether you should use them or hold them. It doesn't feel exactly natural. Curian, where the rotation is super tight, so oftentimes you're kind of holding and waiting for your rotation to be perfect where you want to use it. And Necrolord, where you have a really long cooldown, and you want to time that at specific moments in fights or encounters or in Mythic Plus. You're not going to have it up for every important pack. So Venthyr feels really good in that aspect. And that's something where I do think Venthyr has some positive light, is you essentially have 2 cooldown cycles, and they, I mean, basically always line up perfectly. You will always have Mirrors AP Touch of the Magi with your 3-minute trinket. I'd say using a 3-minute trinket is probably the best way to go, whether it's IQD or whether it's Imperial Ordnance. I tried both of them, and I did like Imperial Ordnance a little bit better, but either of them are just fine. Whichever one you have at the highest eye level is just going to be fine. So you always have that 3-minute trinket, AP, Mirrors, Touch of the Magi go, and you always have your Rune of Power, Touch of the Magi go, and then you have an off go with just AP, Mirrors, and Touch of the Magi. But because AP and Mirrors have that 1.5-minute cooldown, it's just perfect. It's big thing with all of your 3-minute trinket, all your AP Mirrors, then you have a little 45-second go with your Touch of the Magi and Rune, then you have an off go with just AP Mirrors and no 3-minute trinket, and then you go back again, you're cycling again, you do a little Touch of the Magi go, and then you go back into your 3-minute cycle. It just feels organic, it feels natural, and the cooldowns line up pretty much perfectly with every single thing all the time, and it's very easy to do. I would say that's kind of one of the benefits of Venthyr, is it's not too complicated. So if you're someone that is looking for a covenant that is straightforward and a lot more easy to play, I think Venthyr is probably that type of covenant. It's going to offer you consistent cooldown use. It's going to feel more natural. The only thing that is somewhat complex is just preparing for your burst windows, where you want to essentially get 4 charges and then farm your clear cast procs. That's the one thing where it does feel a little off compared to Curian specifically, but every other covenant has to do that anyways, so it's not a specific knock to Venthyr, it's just a non-Curian thing. So overall, the consistency of cooldowns does feel really good, and that's kind of one of the benefits to the playstyle. I do not think this playstyle is for me personally. I will probably not be going back to Venthyr unless something dramatically changes. Like I kind of mentioned that 1-minute AP, 1-minute Mirrors potential with the new legendary effect. That would be something where I might want to try that out down the road. Other than that, though, I do think Venthyr is predominantly for individuals that like to off-spec Frost and play Arcane as more of like a 50-50 thing with Frost, where you're not an Arcane main, you're someone that plays Frost occasionally. I just don't think Venthyr can compete with any of the other covenants in any form of content consistently enough. I do say consistently enough because when everything lines up with Venthyr, it still pumps. It still does insane damage. You're still topping meters. You're blowing shit up. It does really good. But you're relying on that RNG, and that RNG is heavily, sometimes frustrating with Soothing Shade. It's more RNG than normal. It's not like, crit percentage RNG. It's like, you're looking at farming Clearcast procs, then hoping for a Soothing Shade proc at the right time, and then lining up your burst go. So it does feel a little off. And that's kind of where I want to end this video here today. Thank you for watching, and if you have any questions about the Venthyr playstyle, I might probably end up making a video on the Venthyr rotation if enough people are interested in seeing the Venthyr rotation. Of course, if you do have any questions, again, pop them down in the comments below. I'd be happy to answer. Everyone have a great day. Thank you for watching.